Today we're going to learn how to do a crimped bracelet. And crimping is your standard way of creating a bracelet. It's not stretchy, so therefore it requires clasps and everything else. Now think of a bracelet as simply a short necklace. So this is the same technique as you would do with a necklace, and you can make a necklace therefore as long as you want. Think about it for an anklet as well. So, you know, the length is totally up to you, and you can create anything. I mean, that's using some glass pearls. There's some sparkly bits and something different, and you can mix and match your beads and add charms and do all the other kind of stuff. So what's involved in doing this? Well, let me switch cameras here. Okay, I'm going to raise this up a little bit so you have a little bit, you can see a bit more of my bead mat. Okay, so the tools that you'll be using are a pair of crimping pliers. Crimping pliers have these openings in them, and you'll be seeing what they do. But basically, they turn what's a crimp bead and sort of mush it down in such a way that it's going to hold your bracelet together. You also need a pair of cutters. This is a pair of flush cutters because you need to cut your beading wire. A pair of round nose pliers. You'll see how I use these. And when it comes to opening and closing jump rings, you're going to need a pair or two pairs of grasping pliers. This is actually bent nose. You could also use flat nose. You could use chain nose. Any of those would be perfectly good. You also need beading wire. Beading wire comes on a spool like this, and a lot of people get it confused with metal wire. Okay, it is two different things. Metal wire is literally metal that has been drawn into a wire, and it bends, and you can do all kinds of things with it, but it is different than beading wire. So this is not what you want. This is what you want. Beading wire has, let me just take this off. It comes in a roll. Oops. And what it is, it's comprised of, in this case, 49 strands of very, very fine wire. And it's encased in sort of this nylon sheath. So that nylon is holding all those 49 strands of wire together. Beading wire comes in 3 weights: fine, medium, and heavy. Some brands also have extra fine. 99.9% of everything you want to do can be done with medium wire, rather than having to buy all different weights. The difference is in the width of the wire itself. Okay, so this one, as I say, it's got 49 strands. The diameter of everything together is 0.019. Okay, so a finer wire would be a thinner diameter. A heavier wire would be a thicker diameter. If you wanted to use fine only, then it's going to be great for things like crystals and pearls, anything that is really lightweight. If you wanted to use heavy only, then that would be good for things like heavier stones, like big stones, not just sort of 6 and 8 millimeters, but big stones. And because that requires a larger crimp and more weight to hold it. But as I say, 99.9% of everything you can do can be done with medium wire. You can do crystals and pearls on this wire, and this will hold pretty good weight of stones. Okay, it does come in a wire. Test strength is about 26 pounds. So that means if you were going to exert 26 pounds of pressure on it, it would hold. If you're going to carry 26 pounds of something around your neck, I'd sort of question about what you were doing. So as I say, this is going to work just fine. It comes in various colors. This is a satin silver, which means you're basically seeing the color of the wire through it. It does come in other colors, but to be honest, when you've got it covered with your materials, no one can tell the color anyways. The color that you can get, whether it's in gold, silver, bronze, champagne, are primarily used if you want to do something called illusion necklaces. And that's where you see the wire. But in normal stuff like this, you don't see the wire at all. You see the wire maybe just a little bit at the end. So the added expense of doing something using the 24 karat gold or sterling silver, you're going to lose the value if it's not going to be seen anyways. So as far as how expensive these are, these come in 30-foot rolls as well as 100-foot rolls. The 30-foot, depending where you get them, works out to almost $1 a foot. So this particular one was purchased at BeatFX, and at the time I bought it, it was $27.10 plus HST, of course, or GST. The 100-meter or 100-foot spool is going to be, you're going to have a savings. It comes out to about $80. So it is less than $1 a foot. However, evaluate whether or not you need 100 feet. I tend to use them because I do use them for kits when I do physical classes. So this is the material that you're going to use. That is what is going through your bracelet. Okay, so you need some findings as well. I'm just going to zoom in here so that you can see some of the findings. Just refocus that. Okay, let's move these out of the way. So these are some of the findings that you're going to use. Of course, you want to use a clasp. In this case, I'm going to be showing you how to use a lobster clasp. You need a couple of jump rings. These happen to be 6mm jump rings. These other weird things are things, some people don't like using them all, but what they do, these little horseshoe kinds of things are what's called wire guardians. And that actually helps protect the nylon sheath. And what that looks like is right, let me just open this so you can see better. Okay. So here's the ending. You do see a little bit of wire because that's because of ease, and I'll explain that as we go along. This is the wire guardian. So the wire is coming around it, and that does help protect the nylon that is surrounding the fine wires and the beading wire. Okay, and then you've got your jump rings. Here I've added a little bit of chain just to make it extensions. On the other end, I've got another jump ring here and the clasp. This guy is what this is, and this is called a crimp cover. It is decorative. You don't need to use it, but what it does, when you have it closed, it looks like a bead. And it works well if you happen to have the wrong color crimp. You know, perhaps the rest of your findings are gold and all you can find is a copper crimp. And so a crimp cover will hide that crimp. It also will hide a badly crimped piece but holds. So again, that will hide a mushed crimp kind of thing. Okay, so the crimp bead itself are these two little teeny tiny beads. And what you want to do is to match up your beading wire size to your wire. So for example, this is 0.019, which is almost 2 mil, or it's pretty small. Not quite a millimeter. However, these are 2mm crimps. You want to be able to go back and forth with 2 passes. So a 2mm crimp works great with the medium size beading wire. If you have a finer wire, then use a smaller crimp, like a 1.8. If you have a heavier wire, then you want to use a bigger crimp bead, such as a 2.5. Most of the time, if something does not, if it slips and doesn't crimp properly, it's usually because the crimp bead is the wrong size. So you want to use as small a crimp bead as possible to hold your wire in place. Okay, so how much wire do you need? When I tend to create kits for physical classes, I give everybody a 12-inch piece. 12 inches works well for a bracelet. You do want to cut a little bit extra so that you have some room to work with. It's like if you're doing beading and you run out of thread, it's frustrating. So don't run out of wire either. Okay, so how do we get this started? Well, I've got my beading wire. It does naturally curl. Don't worry about that. Let's move this out of the way. First thing I'm going to do is to pick up my crimp bead and slide that crimp bead on there. Next thing I'm going to do is to pick up the wire guardian. And the wire guardian at the bottom has 2 little holes. Let me zoom in so I think you can see it a little bit better. There we are. You can see it has 2 little holes, and you're going to go up one side. Sometimes it can be a little on the tight side. Come on, get up there. We have an audience. I'm just going to trim this. There's my crimp bead. I'm just going to trim this so I have a tighter. There we go. Okay, crimp bead back on. Wire guardian on. There we go. That was better. It is a small opening, so sometimes you just have to get a sharper cut. So you've gone in one hole, we're coming around and going down the other hole. Like that. Okay, you don't need a lot of overhang here. Okay, so 1 inch works great. And then this little tail end of wire goes into the crimp bead as well. Like that. And sometimes that crimp bead can feel tight. That's good. You want it to feel tight. Okay, that is ready to crimp. Notice that, I'm just refocusing here. Okay, notice that my crimp bead is not all the way up to here. That's okay. You don't want to force it. I'm also making sure that my wires do not cross. I don't want them to cross like that. I'm not going to get a good crimp. If you're making these bracelets or necklaces for yourself or for others, you don't want to have a bad experience. So what I do is I make sure they're lying side by side here, and then I spread them out a little bit just to make sure that they're not crossing. Now, to crimp it, you'll notice that I have 3 channels. And when I close it, you'll see that 2 of the beads, or 2 of the holes, sort of look like lips. One's a little bit bigger than the other. This particular pair of crimping pliers are designed to crimp multiple sizes. I'm going to use the middle one because it's a little bit smaller. The one at the end is a little more oval. So crimping is a 2-step process. I'm going to lay the crimp bead inside the middle channel because that's the smaller of the lips one, and I'm just going to squish it down. And what I get is the crimp bead. I've created a divot in that. Okay, I think you can see that. So the divot now, I need to pinch that together. And to do that, I'm going to turn this on its side and put it into the channel that's at the end. Remember, that's the one that is more of an oval. And what I'm going to do is put that in there and then squish both sides together. And there I have created a crimp. So I first squished that crimp in half, created a divot, and then closed the two halves together. At this point, I want to make sure this holds. So I'm going to put in my round nose pliers and give it a good pull. And I am pulling hard. If you can see, my fingers are turning white. That's not going to slip. So that's crimped. If you give it to somebody or you sell it to somebody, you know that's going to hold in place. This is actually ready to go. I can put beads on here now. The crimp bead, or the crimp cover rather, I'm going to put that on just so it gives a nice finish. It's a little finicky to use. I usually hold it so that it's on my finger. The crimp bead is inside. Crimp covers come in different sizes. So this happens to be a 4mm crimp cover. What that does is when it's closed, it will resemble a 4mm bead. A smaller crimp cover will resemble a smaller bead. They also come in different finishes. To close this, I'm just going to take my pliers that have a little bit of surface and very gently, oops, that was not quite as gently as I wanted. Just take it in different angles and close it. They are easily bent, so just FYI, as I say, gently and slowly. Sometimes they surprise you like that. Okay. There, that's now closed around the crimp, and it looks like a bead. That takes a bit of practice. So that's the purpose of the crimp cover. Okay, so let's zoom back a little bit. These other pieces we will worry about later, but what I pulled out to create a bracelet is some stone, and this is moss agate. It's really cool. It's a dark stone, dark green, and I've also pulled out some accent beads that I can put in between. Okay. I'm also, because I mean, you can't wear necklaces without a pair of earrings, we'll also go through how to create a pair of earrings. I've already done one, and we'll create the second one as well. So at this point, this is where you get to play designer. And it's like, okay, what do I want to do? Shall I put maybe two beads together and then with something in between? Now, how long should you make your bracelet? That's a hard question to answer because everybody's wrist size is different. When you are figuring out your sizing, all that stuff, all these findings that you put in do take a certain amount of space. So you need to accommodate that as well. So this actually, I've got a piece measurement here. This is actually about 1.5 inches. So 1.5 inches of your bracelet is going to be devoted to your findings. So bracelets are actually one of the hardest things to try and fit. So if you can manage a bracelet, you can manage a whole lot of things. So that's an option. Perhaps I want to do something a little more irregular, like that. So there would be something in here as well. This is where you can design and take your time designing. So I've got 2, 1, 2, 1. I kind of like that. So I think that'll be my pattern. So I'm going to start actually with just a plain bead. Notice that this little tail, I do want to push it in if I can. If this ever does slip, I have that much grace before it comes completely done. If it doesn't fit into the holes of your beads, because you've tested it, you can cut that off, but test it first. Okay, but this fits, and I'm going to just tuck the tail in there. And this was a two-piecer. So I'm going to put the other in. Make sure that this little piece gets in between the beads. I can't tell you how many times I've created my bracelets or necklaces and had a piece stuck out like that. So it's just taking a little bit of care. And at this point, I can just put my beads on. You'll notice that my silver beads have a bit more bigger hole. That's not going to matter in a bracelet or a necklace. It will matter. I'll show you how to compensate for that in a pair of earrings though. So that's the pattern I'm thinking I'm going to do. And this is where you just, as I say, you play. And if you don't like the way it looks, take it apart and try it again. You can play with color. You can play with all kinds of stuff in different shaped. You don't have to, keep everything silver. You can play with different kinds of beads as well. And perhaps you want to do a sampler bracelet. Perhaps you have all these leftover beads that would look really cool together. So 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, I'm still right. So as I say, play. This is a 1. Budgie's back sitting on my shoulder. 2. This is a 2. Back to a 1. Okay. And let's see what happens if I end up on a 2. Okay. Let's see how I'm going to just guesstimate to see how this fits. I need, as I figured out, about 1.5 inches. Oops, you can't see there. So if I spread this out so it's about 1.5 inches, that will give me a pretty good sizing for my bracelet. Okay, I don't think it'll be too tight. This is important, so go ahead and try and size it. And as I say, sizing can be difficult. So I think that will work. If it's a little short, I can actually add on a bit of chain to create an extender. So that works really well. If you're making it for somebody and aren't sure the length that you need, you can add a little bit of chain, make it a little bit longer. Okay. So I've created what I think should be a good length. I'm now going to crimp the other end. This end is a little bit more difficult now because you've got stuff in the way. So I'm sliding on my crimp cover, or crimp bead rather, sorry, got wrong word there. And putting on my wire guardian. Some people don't like wire guardians because it does add some length for the findings, but it does really help. Okay, back down the other side. Sorry, my fingers are there in the way. Come on, get in there. There we go. And where's my crimp bead is right there. Working with small pieces like this, it does tend to be very fiddly. Okay, so this is all my components back on the end. And of course, I need to close off this space. To do that, I found that if I treat it like a pulley, the other thing I want to do is put 1 bead on this. Remember, we put a little bit extra in here. I want a little bit extra over here. So I'm just going to pull this down a little bit more. And put my wire through there. Come on, I want you to fit. There we go. If you talk nice to it, it usually helps. Okay, I need to close up this gap. So to do that, I'm putting my round nose pliers in there, and I'm just going to pull this down, and that creates like a pulley and brings it together. Come on, there we go. Okay. I need to leave what's called ease. Have you ever bought a bracelet or picked up something and it's really stiff to close? It does not close in a circle easily. That's called ease. You need to give yourself a bit of ease. The bigger the beads, the more ease you will need. A smaller bead like this doesn't need as much of a gap to make it go around. When it goes around, it's taking up space. So you'll notice that there's no space here when I make this round, okay? But when it's flat, there is a bit of space in there. And people do get upset about that. Like it's got space. That's okay. That space is taken up when it goes round. It's just physics. So same as here. You'll notice these are a bit bigger beads. It's got a bit bigger space. That's ease. So here, I need to make sure it goes around. That's actually a little on the tight side. So if I give it a little bit more space, and I'm just pulling, this is not crimped yet, so I'm just adjusting my space. That's better. Okay. So that is comfortable. When I straighten it, yes, I do have space there, but that's the ease. So don't worry about this space. I'm just pulling everything down there. Okay, it's time to crimp this again. To the best of my ability, this is lying side by side, making sure it's not flat. I can't spread it out now. This is why it makes it just a little bit more difficult. So let me get my, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. Okay, and focus. Okay, so we're back to my crimping. So just as we did before, we're going to put it into the middle channel. That's to crimp the smaller size crimp. Squish. There's the divot. I'm going to take it now into the other side and squish those two divots together. This is using the channel that's at the end, and that's the one that is more of an oval. And that is squished together. So let's test this. Better to know now. That's not moving. Okay, that's crimped. So now what we can do is put on the crimp cover. And close the crimp cover gently. There we go. And if you take it from different angles, you can form it into a circle or a sphere much easier. Okay. There's the crimp cover closed. You do see the seam a little bit, but that's okay. All right, that's now crimped. Okay, and it goes into a circle. Now this extra wire, what you're going to do is just take your wire cutters and you're going to cut it as close as possible like that. Make sure you've got the right wire. I have done that before, cut the wrong one and had to start all over. That's how you crimp a bracelet, like that. Okay, so let's finish it. To do this, what we're going to do is add on jump rings. To open and close a jump ring, you hold it into a pair of pliers like that. The opening is up here. you take another pair of pliers, and I'm using 2 pairs of bent nose pliers to open, one part toward me, one part away. Never open the pliers so that you're straightening out this. You want to open it like a hook. So that's one side, and we close them by bringing both sides together, making sure that there is no space between the ends of the jump brace. Space means there's room for something to escape. Okay, let's do the other end. So again, open, one part toward you, one part away. Pop this on and your clasp. And of course, you don't have to use a lobster clasp. Magnetic clasps are great, they're my favorite. Toggle clasps, anything like that. But whatever clasp you use, and remember to accommodate the size of the clasp in your total bracelet. Okay, that's finished. And there it is. Okay, so zoom out a little bit. So there, it's finished. So that's how to make a bracelet. And as I say, oh, see where I said the little thing? Okay, so I didn't check that. So this is where we started at the beginning. I'm going to take my wire cutters and just snip off that little bit that's hanging out, making sure I don't cut the wire that's going through all of the beads. Now it's finished. Now I'm happy with it. Okay, so that's how you do a crimped bracelet. If I made this longer, I would have a necklace. 18 inches, 16 inches usually is what most people like if they want it on the collar or just under their collarbones. 22, 24, even 36 inches, depending on the style you want. Okay, so to go with my bracelet, how about a pair of earrings? So I sort of designed something like this. What I want to do to create a pair of earrings, what I've used here is something called head pins. And these are heavy gauge head pins. They're 20 gauge. They come in packages. You can get them all kinds of places. Michael's, Bead Effects, any other bead store. They're not overly expensive. I get these in packages of about 100. They cost, you know, $4-ish. I'm not sure how old this is, but you know, you're looking between $4 and $5 for 100. A head pin is basically a piece of wire with a nail head on the end. Its purpose is just to stack beads onto it so that you can dangle. That dangled in this case has become sorry, my brain has just fried, has become an earring. I could also hang it as a pendant. I could hang it as all kinds of stuff. But a head pin is a basic part of your toolkit. If you find something called an eye pin, instead of a nail head, it's got a little loop. So that's the difference. So to create this, what I did was put, let's get another one of these, sort of like this. Now, I did mention these have pretty big holes. So what happens when you've got a big hole on a small head pin is that it falls off. A quick way to remedy that is to use something called seed beads. These are beads that they come in tubes, available in different sizes. This happens to be a size 8. I am doing a series with Boomerang called Seed Bead Sensations, starting Monday, I guess it is. And we're going to be talking about seed beads as well as some of the techniques that you can do with seed beads. However, in this case, I'm going to use it as a little plug so that the the bead doesn't fall off. So it's gone on there. I've made it a crystal clear one, so it's not going to be noticeable. And that stops that bigger bead from falling off. At this point, I'm going to put on my stone and another big bead. I'm also going to put another seed bead on. What happens when you have some bigger stones is that it wiggles around. And so this seed bead will help center. It's easier if I do it this way. You're welcome, Kenji. I appreciate that. Okay, so that actually helps center this as well as keeps it from moving. Okay, so how do we turn this into this? Well, it's easy. What we're going to use is a couple pairs of pliers. Let's move these out of the way. And we need, let's move this out of the way too. There's our finding. What we're going to do is create something called a simple loop. And a couple ways you can do it. I usually just bend it against my nail like this, and I do a 90-degree angle like that. You can use, you can bend it against using pliers as well, but this works just fine. And it looks a little scary. It doesn't look like it's, the way it's supposed to be. Let me just zoom in here so you see a little bit better. Not to worry. Now, I don't need, straighten this up just a little bit. Okay, there we go. This will straighten up a little bit as I do it. I don't need all of this wire. I just need a small amount to create a loop. So what I'm going to do is with my cutters, I'm going to cut it so that I have about 3/8 of an inch to a centimeter, depending on how you measure things. The rest of this will be discarded. And so what I'm going to do when you cut, make sure the pieces don't fly off. Okay, I'm now going to turn this into a loop. So to do that, I'm going to hold this. I'm left-handed. I'm going to hold this in my non-dominant hand, which happens to be my right hand. If you are right-handed, you're just going to do the mirror image of this. I'm going to hold my round nose pliers in my dominant hand, and notice that the wire is facing me. I see the tip of that wire, just like you are. I'm going to hold the pliers in my hand so that I see the back of my hand. Let me zoom out just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. Okay, the action that I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to turn my wrist, and that will straighten, or that will cause there. Okay, so the wire here is facing me. This is being held in my non-dominant hand, and I've got a, notice that I have a finger underneath everything because I don't want it all to move. I'm going to take my pliers, and wherever I attach it along, or wherever I grasp it rather, along the jaw, that is the size of the loop it's going to be. This is a pretty small piece of wire, so I'm just going to take it towards the tip, which will be a smaller loop. Okay, so by the edge of the wire is flush. You don't feel it here. This takes practice, so don't be intimidated by this. So my right hand is holding it in place. My left hand is simply going to roll as far as I can, like that. Okay, don't be intimidated. As I say, it takes practice. However, that's not perfect. Let me see if I can fix it a little bit by putting my tips of the pliers in there and just seeing if I can roll this a little bit better. Okay, that's pretty good. That's not bad. And you can make adjustments. Wire is very forgiving. Okay, there's the dangle. Don't worry about it if it's not really tight. Gravity is going to hold everything in place. Now to attach it, attach this to this. What I'm going to do is, just like I opened a jump ring, I'm going to open this. And on this particular style of ear wires, the opening is on this side. So I'm going to just hold everything out of place here. Put my nail under that and keep it from moving. And I'm just going to put this back in focus for you. Bring one part away from me, one part toward me. I'm going to pop this on. Come on. And you don't have to open it far, just far enough to get the wire in there. So that's what it looks like. Pull everything out of the way again. Take my pliers and bring these parts back together, making sure that there's no space, because as I say, space means something can escape. There's my second earring. There it is. Okay, so I now have a set of jewelry that I can wear or give to somebody, or if I wanted to make money, I could also sell it at craft shows or to friends, family, and so on. So that's the technique. Now the challenge is make the technique yourself. You're going to have the recording of this, and yes, you will need some tools. Some people, instead of using crimping pliers, they'll just simply squish the crimp flat. Most of the time that will hold. However, you do run the risk of it not holding and over time just working its way out, because it is a different action. Also, I do have a necklace that somebody gave to me who did just squish the crimps flat, which caused some sharp corners. It's really irritating to wear it, and it won't fit into a crimp cover very well. It's because crimp covers are round, and you've got to squish crimp that is basically square. So crimping pliers they're not overly cheap. They're about $25, and so when you're buying tools, you want to buy the best you can afford. They don't have to be the best on the market. Okay, so this particular one I got from BeatFX. It's called a Euro style crimper, and it is, I say, about $25. Cutters, this particular brand of cutter is about $30. However, you can get them much less. The difference between a lesser pair and a more expensive pair is that the least expensive stuff won't last as long, but they will work just as well, just for a shorter amount of time. Okay, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask me all the questions you want. No questions? Oh my goodness.
That was really helpful, Pam.
Oh, you're quite welcome. You're quite welcome.
Thank you, Pam.
I
do have just one question. If you could go over the crimp sizes with the wire just again, because I often think I've got it right and then I can't make it work.
Okay, no problem. So as I say, crimp wire comes in, or beading wire rather, comes in different sizes. I find that the medium size beading wire works well for 2mm crimps. It does not matter if those are round crimps or tubes. What you're looking at, that 2mm, is the diameter, not the length. So 2mm crimps with a medium. If you're using a heavier wire, then you'll want to increase the crimp size probably to about 2.5. If you're using a fine medium wire, then you want a smaller crimp, possibly 1.8. Some of the brands, I'm trying to think, Beadalon actually states what size crimps Part of the problem in the beading world is that there is nothing that is sort of universal.
Mm.
Each brand does have its own sizing system. The best thing I can suggest is working within that sort of criteria, but always test your crimp.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, well, thank
Ah.
you. Thank you, Linda. Oh, good for you, Jaga. It worked great. And you've got your earrings to go with you. That is amazing. Thank you. So
Pam?
see, yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you use like a clear stringing wire and use a crimp, excuse me, to make like an illusion necklace? Or,
You
or is
can.
it only the wire?
No, well, illusion, the monofilament is actually a different material. Monofilament is plastic or a nylon, but it is a man-made piece. If you're going to do crimps, you can use the small crimps. Just be gentler with it because you don't want to cut the monofilament.
Okay. Is there something better than a crimp?
No, that would be
Okay.
what you'd want to do. You could tie knots, but some of the monofilament doesn't lie well when you are doing knots. If you wanted to do a monofilament, yeah, monofilament, I would use crimps, small crimps. Just don't crimp it to death. You want it crimped as well enough to hold it. You won't have the same tension on it, basically.
Okay.
Great
So
question.
you just want it to hold, right? You don't
You
need
want
it
it to hold. You don't need to do a death crimp on it.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. So you will have my contact information, my email. It's PamelaKearns2019@gmail.com. Also, I do work at BeatFX. I'm the class coordinator there, and I do teach. Crimps have been a cramp for me. Yeah, it's one of those challenges. Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. You can also contact me through BeatFX, Pam at BeatFX, BeadFX.com. And I'm there basically Monday to Thursday. So